Welcome to the debate. Today, we are cracking open a text that has made readers squirm for thousands of years. Proverbs chapter 7. Now, on the surface, this looks like the classic parental talk. You have a father warning his son about the strange woman, the seductress, and, the path to Sheol. It reads like a pretty straightforward behavioral prohibition against adultery. But when we strip away the English translation and look at the Hebrew architecture underneath, we find something far more disturbing. I'm arguing today that this isn't just a rule book for avoiding illicit sex. It is a sophisticated psychological mashal, a riddle about the very nature of human perception.
It is certainly a riddle, but I do worry that by psychologicalizing it, we risk defanging it. I come at this from the structural view, so while you are looking at the internal psychology of the reader, the mindset, if you will, I believe the text is outlining a lethal, objective reality. The central tension here isn't just about how we perceive the world, it is about the collision between covenant and consumption. This is a text about a war zone, not just, a therapy session.
That's a fair distinction to start with. I represent the formation perspective. I believe Proverbs 7 functions primarily as a mirror. It is a diagnostic tool designed to reveal the law in the eye. My core thesis is that the text teaches us that, vision precedes desire. The text judges the viewer. If you read this chapter and just see a story about a bad woman and a foolish boy, you've missed the point. You haven't looked in the mirror.
And I represent the structural perspective. I'd argue that the text draws a hard, objective line between sister wisdom and the strange woman. This is about the ontological nature of eros. If desire is detached from covenant, it doesn't just become naughty or misaligned, it becomes fatal. The young man doesn't die because he has a bad attitude or poor introspection. He dies because he walks into a structural trap of extraction.
Okay, so let's get right into the evidence because I think the text supports my vision thesis immediately. Most people think Proverbs 7 starts with the woman or the window or the street corner. It doesn't. It starts with anatomy. Look at verse 2. Keep my commandments and live. Keep my law as the apple of your eye. Now, listeners might gloss over apple of the eye as just a poetic idiom, something precious. But the Hebrew word there is ishon.
Which is a fascinating word.
It is. Ishon literally means little man. It refers to that tiny reflection of yourself that you see in someone else's pupil when you're standing very, very close to them. It is the pupil, the actual aperture of sight.
It implies extreme closeness, yes. Intimacy.
But more than intimacy, it implies a filter. The pupil is the gateway of light. The text is saying, before you even step out the door, before you encounter any object of desire, the law, the Torah, must be the physical lens through which you process reality. The young man introduced in verse 7 is described as lacking heart or lacking sense. My argument is that he isn't just some hormonal teenager. He's someone operating without an interpretive framework. He lacks the law in the eye. And because his vision is unformed, his destruction is inevitable before he even meets the woman. The tragedy is internal before it becomes external.
I agree that the concept of Ashon is critical, and I love that image of the little man in the eye. I do. But if we stay inside the eye, we ignore what the eye is looking at. You're treating the environment as secondary to his perception, but the text spends the vast majority of its verses describing the external threat. The pivot of the chapter isn't just the eye, it's verse 4. Say to wisdom, you are my sister, and call insight your intimate friend.
Which is a relational claim.
It's a structural binary. In the ancient world, and specifically in this text, you have two categories, kin and stranger. The text sets up a zero-sum game. You have wisdom as sister, which represents safety, family, covenant, inheritance, the known. On the other side, you have the strange woman, or the alien woman. She is strange specifically because she is not kin. My argument is that the text is warning us that you cannot have eros without structure. If you don't define wisdom as sister, you inevitably define the stranger as lover. It's not just about seeing correctly, it's about the fact that if you step outside the covenant framework, you are stepping into a mechanism of death. I mean, you can have the best eyesight in the world, but if you walk off a cliff, gravity still kills you.
I'm not denying the danger, But I think you're treating the strange woman as a kind of monster under the bed, whereas the text suggests she is a projection of the young man's own disordered loves. And this brings us to the most shocking piece of evidence in the chapter, the vocabulary of the seduction. This is where the translation often hides the real tension. In verse 18, the woman says, "Come, let us take our fill of loves." The Hebrew word she uses is dodim,
Yes, a plural noun, loves.
but not just any loves. Dodim is the specific, technical term used in the Song of Songs to describe the holy, sanctioned, explosive love between the bride and groom. The bride in the song says, "Your dodim is better than wine." This is the crux of my argument. The text does not use dirty words to describe the affair. It uses the holiest word for passion available in the Hebrew lexicon. Why?
Well, I have a theory on why, but go on.
I believe it's because Proverbs 7 is not anti-eros. It's not saying desire is bad. It's acknowledging that the desire the young man feels is the exact same energy that fuels the Song of Songs. The tragedy is that he is seeking dodim, which is a good thing, without the law in the eye. He is trying to get the right thing in the wrong way. The text validates the intensity of his hunger while condemning his method of feeding it.
See, I look at that same evidence, the use of dodim, and I come to the opposite conclusion. I don't think the shared vocabulary validates his desire. I think it proves the weaponization of the trap. The strange woman is a mimic. She doesn't come offering sin or filth. She comes offering a counterfeit of the covenant. She uses the language of the Song of Songs to bait the trap.
But if the desire itself is evil, why use the word dodim? Why not use a word for perversion?
Because evil is always a distortion of the good. That's just standard theology. But here's the rub. In the Song of Songs, dodim leads to life and garden imagery. In Proverbs 7, that same word leads to the slaughterhouse. The variable that changes is the covenant. You cannot separate the word from its container. My structural argument is that dodim outside of the strict wisdom framework effectively changes its chemical composition. It stops being love and becomes lust. The text is warning us that high-voltage energy, eros, without the insulation of the covenant, will electrocute you. It doesn't matter if you call it dodim. If it's outside the house of wisdom, it kills you.
But how does one distinguish between the mimic and the reality? That's the problem. If the vocabulary is the same, if the feelings are the same, if the intensity is the same, how does the young man know the difference? That brings me right back to the law in the eye. The only way to spot the counterfeit is if your perception has been trained by the law. You can't rely on the feeling of love because the strange woman offers that too. You have to rely on the form of the law to decode the situation.
I can accept that. But we need to define what we mean by law here. Modern listeners hear law and they think of a speed limit or a wet blanket designed to ruin the party. They think of rules that exist to stop them from having fun. But the source material for this debate critiques that view, specifically referencing Anders Nygren's famous division between agape and eros.
Right. That was a massive theological debate in the 20th century. Nygren argued that agape is God's love. It's self-giving and descends from above. And eros is human desire. It's acquisitive, greedy, and ascends from below. He argued they're completely incompatible.
Exactly. But Proverbs 7 seems to reject that split entirely.
Completely. The divine fullness requires both. When I say law and the eye, I don't mean a suppression of fire. I mean the fireplace grate. The grate doesn't put out the fire. It allows the fire to warm the house instead of burning it down. I mean, look at Psalm 119. The writer delights in the law. It's erotic language. I pant for your commandments. So the fool in Proverbs 7 doesn't lack passion. He has plenty of eros. What he lacks is the integration of law and love. He hasn't disciplined his vision, so his eros just spills out as chaos.
Spills out as chaos is a polite way of putting it. I would say it calcifies into lust. And this is where the structural definition is vital. We need to be precise because the words matter. The text and our source material defines lust not just as wanting sex, but specifically as movement toward consumption.
This is the extraction model.
Right. It is extraction.
The strange woman represents a transaction. She takes. I have come out to meet you, to seek your face, she says. It sounds nice, but notice the context. She's hunting. The source material draws a chilling parallel to modern pornography here.
Yes, the concept of simulated consumption.
Exactly. Pornography is the ultimate strange woman, because it's a closed loop. There's no other person there, really. It is just an image used for self-referential satisfaction. It trains the eye to view the human form as a resource to be mined, like coal or gold. That is the definition of lust in this text. Extraction without reciprocity. The structural barrier of the law, the thou shalt not, is the only thing that stops the human heart from, well, cannibalizing everything it finds beautiful.
I agree with the extraction versus communion distinction. It's profound. But I want to push back on the solution. You seem to imply the solution is just staying behind the barrier. Like, if you just follow the rules, you're safe. But the text is a mashal. It's a riddle. It's forcing the reader to self-reflect. If the reader looks at Proverbs 7 and just sees a scary warning about bad women, they are reading with flesh. They are still just looking at the bodies.
And what does reading with wisdom look like to you?
It looks like realizing you are the young man. The text functions as a mirror. The danger isn't just out there on the street corner. It's in the alignment of your own heart. And this prevents a Gnostic reading, where we just say bodies are dangerous, sex is bad, stay away from girls. No, the body is good. Dodim is good. The tragedy is that the young man is misusing a good thing. If we don't realize the text is judging our own internal alignment, we miss the diagnosis. We might avoid the physical act of adultery, but if our eyes are still scanning the world for things to consume, whether that's power or status or bodies, we are still in the trap.
I see the power of the mirror argument. I do. It convicts the reader, it makes the text timeless rather than just situational. But I'm skeptical that internal alignment is enough to save us. You can't just think your way out of a room full of chloroform. The text implies a need for a counter-environment.
What do you mean by counter-environment?
Well, the source references Hosea 2, where God uses this same erotic language. He says, I will allure her, and I will betroth her to me. But the answer to the allure of the strange woman isn't just better mental discipline. It's a stronger betrothal. It's liturgy. The source connects this to baptism and the Eucharist. These are bodily acts. We don't just meditate the law into our eyes. We eat it. We wash in it. The strange woman only looks attractive because we are starving for the true dodim of the covenant. The solution is structural. You have to inhabit the house of wisdom through practice, not just analyze it through reflection.
That's a very strong point. The law in the eye isn't a mental hack. It's a way of life. It's an immersion. But let's look at where that way of life, or the lack of it, leads. The end of the chapter is devastating. Verse 22, he goes like an ox to the slaughter. The passivity is just terrifying.
It is. He doesn't think he's evil. He doesn't even think he's in danger. He thinks he's lucky.
Exactly. He thinks he's found a great opportunity. Stolen water is sweet. He is passive because he is blind. Because the law wasn't in his eye, because he didn't have that eye-shon filter. He saw the upholstery and the cinnamon described in verses 16 and 17. He saw the texture of the trap, but missed the trajectory. This reinforces my formation perspective. His failure was a failure of perception. He couldn't see the slaughterhouse because he was too focused on the thread count of the bedspread.
But I have to bring it back to geography. He was only near the bedspread because he was, as the text notes, passing along the street near her corner at twilight. He physically placed himself in the geography of death. You can't keep the law in your eye while your feet are walking toward the slaughterhouse. The text is very practical. It's spatial. Wisdom is a house, folly is a house. You cannot be in both. The young man dies because he tried to take the energies of the covenant, the dodim, into the house of the stranger.
And that brings us back to the central tragedy. The young man is looking for life. He wants union. That's a God-given hunger. It's what Augustine called our restless hearts. But he feeds it through extraction. He tries to feed on the strange woman, not realizing that in the economy of lust, he is the meal.
She has cast down many wounded. It is a battlefield. She doesn't love him, she consumes him.
So, as we look at the modern application, specifically regarding the simulated consumption of digital images or the way we treat people as commodities, the remedy isn't just stop looking. It is change the governing lens. You have to learn to desire communion more than consumption. You have to see the strange woman or the image on the screen or the illicit opportunity not as a source of pleasure, but as a violation of reality.
And I would add, you must replace the false intimacy of the image with the true intimacy of the covenant community. You cannot fight a vacuum with willpower. You must fill it with the real. The one-flesh union of marriage or the deep community of the church is the structural antidote to the fragmentation of lust.
It seems we are circling the Shema, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength. Proverbs 7 is essentially the Shema applied to our sexuality.
I can agree with that. It's the great commandment applied to the groin. It brings the body into the theology.
To wrap up my position, Proverbs 7 is a call to the sanctification of desire. It reframes sexual ethics from a game of how far can I go to a profound question of formation. How do I form a heart that desires rightly? The text challenges us to look in the mirror, check our eye, and ask if our vision is aligned with God's design for union.
And my summary is this. The text is a stark, structural warning. It validates that human desire is high-stakes theology. It's powerful stuff. But it insists that without the covenantal framework, all union degenerates into extraction. The strange woman is a real, objective threat, and the only safety is to be firmly planted in the house of wisdom.
We agree, then, that the text rejects the suppression of desire in favor of its ordering.
Absolutely. It's not about putting out the fire. It's about keeping it in the hearth so the house doesn't burn down.
So we leave you with this question. Is your vision governed by appetite or covenant? When you look at the world, do you see objects to be consumed or opportunities for communion?
And do you recognize that one path leads to the bed and the other to the grave?
Thank you for listening to The Debate.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive. Today, we are opening up a file that, I'm going to be honest right off the bat, usually makes people pretty uncomfortable. We're looking at Proverbs chapter 7.
Ah, yes, the famous forbidden woman passage.
Right, and look, if you grew up in any kind of religious circle or, even just around traditional literature, you know the vibe of this chapter. It is the scared straight program of the Bible.
That is a very good way to put it.
It reads like a warning label on a chainsaw, Young men, keep your pants on, don't go to the bad part of town, and definitely under no circumstances talk to the woman hanging out on the street corner.
It is usually framed as a very specific, very rigid behavioral manual. Don't do X, don't do Y, avoid this specific trap, and you'll stay safe.
Exactly. And frankly, to a modern ear, it can sound a little, it can feel a bit misogynistic. It feels like the text is blaming the woman for the man's lack of self-control. It's the classic temptress archetype.
It is. And that reading has caused a lot of problems, a lot of very simplistic and, frankly, harmful interpretations over the centuries.
So when I saw the stack of research you brought in today, I was honestly expecting a lecture on morality. Adultery is bad, stay faithful, which, sure, is good advice. I'm not knocking it. But it's not exactly mind-blowing stuff.
No, it's not.
It feels a bit like a Sunday school lesson for teenagers.
Right. And if you read it on the surface, that is exactly what it is, a moral cautionary tale. A simple, don't touch the hot stove warning. But the sources we're diving into today, specifically the structural analysis of the Hebrew poetry and the linguistic cross-references, they argue that if you stop there, you are missing the entire point of the text.
You're saying the don't have sex reading is actually the shallow reading.
It is the superficial reading. The deep dive argument here is that Proverbs 7 is not primarily a story about sex. It is a diagnostic story about vision.
Vision, like how you see things.
Exactly. It is a treatise on human perception. The sex is the variable in the equation. The vision is the control. The core argument is that what you see dictates what you want. The text is actually setting up a war between two competing types of desire. Eros, which is the longing for union, for connection, and lust, which is the desire for for consumption.
Okay, that is a massive pivot. We're going from a very specific command, don't cheat on your spouse, to a universal principle about how do human beings perceive reality. That's a huge jump.
It's a huge jump. And to prove it, there is a linguistic smoking gun in this chapter that completely blew my mind when I first saw it in the notes. I mean, it changed the entire texture of the passage.
I think I know what you're referring to, the word used for the affair itself.
Yes. The Hebrew word used in this chapter for the illicit, destructive, life-ruining affair is the exact same word used in the Song of Songs to describe the holy, celebrated, God-ordained marriage bed.
Which shouldn't be possible. I mean, normally in these texts, you have bad words for sin and good words for righteousness. We have words for filth versus words for purity.
Exactly. We expect a clear moral vocabulary. But here, the vocabulary is identical, which forces us as readers to ask a much more interesting question. If the action looks the same, and the word describing the action is the same, what makes one lead to death and the other lead to life?
That's the real mystery.
That is the mystery we have to solve today.
So, okay, if this is a story about vision, where do we start? I mean, my instinct is to jump to the action, the guy walking down the street at twilight. Because that's usually where the movie begins in my head.
And that's the first mistake most readers make. They jump straight to the drama in verse 6 or 7. But the source material emphasizes again and again that the lens is installed in the first 5 verses. You have to look at the setup before you look at the scene.
The setup, okay, I've got the text open here. I'm looking at Proverbs 7, verse 2. The father figure is speaking to the son. He says, "Keep my commandments and live. Keep my law as the apple of your eye."
Apple of the eye. Let's just pause there for a second. How do you hear that phrase, just in everyday English?
I mean, it's a cliche at this point, right? My daughter is the apple of my eye. It means she's my favorite. She's precious. It's a term of endearment. It means I gaze at her with love.
In modern English, yes. That's exactly how we use it. But the Hebrew idiom here is infinitely more technical. It's almost anatomical. The word being translated as apple is Aishon.
Yishon. Okay.
It literally means little man.
Little man. Like a tiny person. What does that even mean?
Well, think about what happens when you stand very close to someone, I mean intimately close, and you look deep into their eyes. What do you see reflected in the center of their pupil?
You see a tiny reflection of yourself.
A tiny reflection of yourself, a little man. So the apple of the eye is a poetic reference to the pupil itself, the aperture, the actual physical organ of perception.
So when the text says, "Keep my law as the apple of your eye," it's not just saying, "Love my law like it's your favorite child."
No, it is saying, make my teaching the pupil through which you see the world. It's an instruction to install this covenant teaching into the very mechanism of your perception. It's about optics, not just affection.
That is way more mechanical than I expected. It's like he's telling him to put on a specific pair of contact lenses before he walks out the door.
That is the perfect analogy, or think of it like an operating system for a camera. The command to fix the eye comes before the story of seduction begins. This is absolutely crucial because the text is teaching the reader how to see before it shows them what to see.
Because if you don't have the lenses...
If you don't have the lenses in, if the operating system isn't installed, then everything that happens next is just blurry shapes and colors.
Right.
You won't be able to interpret the data correctly.
We're just reacting to stimulus.
Exactly. The source asserts that if the law, and by law here, we don't mean just a list of rules, we mean the very structure of reality, the covenant. If that isn't the operating lens, then the young man has no chance. The rest of the chapter collapses into either moralism on one hand or voyeurism on the other.
It changes the stakes completely. It's not just a story about a guy with weak willpower. It's a story about a guy with a vision impairment. He's not just immoral, he's blind.
Precisely. He is flying blind. And this leads to a really interesting concept the source calls the mashal.
I saw that word in the notes, mashal, M-A-S-H-L. It usually just gets translated as proverb.
Usually. But proverb makes us think of a fortune cookie or a pithy saying. A mashal is much more dynamic. It's more like a simulation or a comparative riddle.
The simulation.
The source argues that Proverbs 7 isn't just reportage. It is not a news story about local man cheats on wife. It's not a historical account.
It's a scenario, a test case.
It is a simulation designed to test you, the reader. It is a mirror. The text is putting your sight on trial. As you read the description of the woman and the street and the twilight, the text is quietly asking you, what do you see here? Do you see an exciting opportunity? Do you see danger? Do you see a person? Do you see an object?
So if I'm reading this and I find myself thinking, well, she sounds kind of interesting, or I get a little thrill from the danger, I'm failing the test.
You are revealing your prescription, essentially. You are showing that the law isn't in your pupil. The narrative isn't just about what the young man does with his body. It is about what he lacks in his vision.
Okay, let's talk about that young man then, because the text introduces him pretty early on. He is, as you said, walking down the street. How does the source describe him? What's his deal?
Well, the text says he is lacking sense or lacking heart. The Hebrew is leb. But heart here isn't about emotion. The source translates this as lacking inner orientation or discernment.
That is interesting. Lacking heart sounds like he is cruel or mean, like the Tin Man from Oz, but you are saying it means he is empty, a vacuum.
He is unformed. He is a blank slate. He doesn't necessarily have bad intentions yet. He just has no intentions. He's just wandering, drifting. And because he lacks that internal structure, that internal gyroscope, you could say, because he hasn't installed the law in his eye, he is completely vulnerable to whatever visual stimulus comes his way.
He is a blank slate walking into a neon-lit trap.
Correct. And his deficit is a deficit of vision. He sees the woman with his physical eyes, but he doesn't see the reality of the situation because his interpretive lens is missing. He sees the bait, but not the hook.
So this brings us to the structure of the chapter. The source material outlines a very specific four-part progression. It's almost like a recipe for disaster, or conversely, a recipe for safety, depending on how you handle step one.
Right. The source points out that the ordering is deliberate and instructive. Step 1, as we've said, install the law in the eye. That's verse 2. Keep my law as the Aishan, the pupil of your eye.
Okay, step 1. Get the right glasses.
Step 2, call wisdom sister. That's verse 4.
Call wisdom sister. I want to pause there because that sounds weirdly specific and honestly a little abstract. How can a concept like wisdom be my sister? What does that even mean in a practical sense?
It establishes kinship, intimacy. I mean, think about the ancient world, and even to some extent today. A sister is the ultimate non-transactional relationship for a young man. You don't use a sister. You don't consume a sister. You protect her. She is part of your identity. She is your blood.
So you're not just supposed to respect wisdom from a distance. You're supposed to feel related to it, like it's family.
Exactly. The source argues that you're supposed to treat wisdom not as an abstract concept like a textbook you memorize for a test, but as a family member you love and protect. You are supposed to have a familial, affectionate bond with discernment.
Okay, that makes sense. So step 1, fix your vision, law in the eye. Step 2, make wisdom family, call her sister. What is step 3?
Step 3 is the scene of invitation. This is where the woman appears with all the erotic language, the sensory details. This runs from about verse 10 to 20.
And step 4?
Step 4 is the outcome, death. The text says his life is the price.
So the argument is that if you skip steps 1 and 2, step 3 inevitably leads to step 4. There's no other possible outcome.
Exactly. And this brings us to one of the most profound insights in the source material regarding the strange woman. The text calls her the Zara, the strange or foreign woman. But we have to ask, why is she strange?
I always assume it meant she was literally a foreigner, like from another country, or maybe just strange, as in acting outside the social norms, or maybe just someone else's wife.
And those are all valid layers of meaning. But the deep dive source argues for a much more profound, a relative definition of strangeness. She only appears strange or foreign because wisdom has not been embraced as sister.
Wait, run that by me again. It's about familiarity. You're saying her strangeness isn't an objective quality of her?
It is the relativity of familiarity. Think about it this way. If you travel to a country you've never been to, everything looks strange. The food, the signs, the customs. You are the stranger.
Yeah.
But if you live there, it's home. It's familiar.
Right. Of course.
Now apply that to the spiritual life. If wisdom is foreign to you, if you don't know it, if the Bible feels alien and restrictive, if God's law feels like a weird, arbitrary set of rules, then the seductress looks exciting and familiar to your untutored desires. She feels like the natural option. She speaks your language.
But if wisdom is your sister?
If wisdom is your sister, if covenant love and faithfulness are your home, your native language, then the seductress looks alien. She looks weird. Her offer sounds like nonsense. She looks like a threat to the family.
That is brilliant. It's that mirror function of the mashal again. The text isn't really about her and her character. It's about him and his allegiances.
And by extension, it is about you, the reader. The text is asking a very pointed question. To whom are you related? If you are related to wisdom, the affair looks like death. If you are estranged from wisdom, the affair looks like life.
So the strange woman is a variable. Her strangeness depends on my sisterness with wisdom.
Precisely. That is why the source says the chapter is a diagnostic. It reveals your loyalties based on how you react to the scene. It's a spiritual Rorschach test.
Okay, let's get into the scene itself, because this is where the language gets really shocking and I think misunderstood. We are moving into section 3 of our outline, defining desire. The woman makes her pitch. She invites the young man to her bed. She describes the linens, the spices. It's very sensory, very appealing.
It is. The text doesn't paint this as an ugly, dirty scene. It's portrayed as luxurious and desirable.
And she says something very specific in verse 18.
She says, "Come, let us take our fill of loves."
Let us take our fill of loves. Plural. That's always struck me as an odd phrasing.
It is odd in English. But in Hebrew, the word is dodim. And this is where the linguistic deep dive gets really interesting. I mentioned this at the top. This isn't a dirty word. It isn't a word for filth or sin or lust in the way we'd expect. Dodim is the exact same word used in the Song of Songs, the holiest book of marital intimacy in the Bible, to describe the passionate love between the bride and groom.
I still can't get over that. The Bible is using the same word for a back alley affair that leads to death and a holy, consecrated marriage that leads to life.
Yes, and the source highlights that the plural form loves, or dodim, signals intensity, abundance, immersion. It is a banquet of love. It is not clinical. It is not cold. The woman is offering something rich and powerful. She's offering a deep, immersive experience of connection.
I think that challenges a lot of how we talk about temptation. We tend to paint sin as ugly. We say, oh, sin is gross, don't do it. But here the language is beautiful. It's alluring.
It is powerful. And that is the point. The temptation isn't come do this gross thing. The temptation is come find connection, come find fullness, come be satisfied. And this forces us to distinguish between two types of desire that use the same raw energy. The source uses the classical terms eros and lust.
Okay, break that down for us, because in everyday English, we use those words almost interchangeably. How does the source define eros?
Eros, and we are using the classical philosophical definition here, is the movement toward union. It is the drive to connect, to commune, to be reciprocal. It's the ache in the human soul that says, I am not enough on my own. I want to be one with another. It's the desire for wholeness.
That sounds human. And good, even.
It is deeply human. The source would argue is God-given. It's the engine of all relationships. But then there is lust.
And lust is?
Lust, in this structural definition, is the movement toward consumption. It seeks extraction. It is focused on, I want to take from you to satisfy me. It is self-referential. It treats the other person as a product to be consumed, not a person to be known and united with.
So eros is about us, and lust is about me.
That's a great way to summarize it.
Yeah.
But here is the catch, and this is the part that I think is so liberating about this reading. The young man in Proverbs 7 doesn't die because he has eros. He doesn't die because he wants connection or intimacy or even sexual pleasure. Those are normal, human, God-given drives.
He dies because.
He dies because his desire is detached from wisdom. He dies because his eros has no container. It's unmoored. The formula the source gives is this. Eros plus law covenant equals communion. Eros minus law covenant equals lust.
So you can have the exact same energy, the same longing for dodim, but the context, the structure, determines if it kills you or brings you to life.
Exactly. Think about a powerful river. As long as it stays within its banks, the covenant, the law, it irrigates the fields, it generates power. It's a source of life for the whole valley.
But if it breaks the banks?
It's a devastating flood. It destroys everything in its path. The water is the same. The structure makes all the difference. Or another analogy the source uses, a nuclear reaction. Inside a power plant, inside the containment field of the covenant, that reaction creates energy for a whole city. It's light, it's warmth, it's power.
But take away the containment field.
And it's a bomb.
Yeah.
It irradiates the neighborhood. The energy is the same. The structure makes the difference between life and death. The source says, the young man doesn't die because desire exists. He dies because desire is detached from wisdom.
That is a profound shift, because I think a lot of people, especially in religious contexts, feel like the Christian answer to desire is just stop wanting things, be a stoic, suppress it, kill it. But this is saying, no, keep the reactor, just build the walls.
Precisely. The goal is not the elimination of desire, but the proper formation of desire.
This leads us right into the theology of it all, into the 4th section of our deep dive. Because I feel like modern culture, and even modern church culture sometimes, absolutely loves to separate law and love. We say things like, it's not about rules, it's about relationship. Or, I don't need a piece of paper from the government to prove I love someone. We treat law and love as enemies.
We do. We have this inherited romantic idea that love is a spontaneous, wild feeling and that law is a cold, restrictive cage that kills it. We think law restricts love. We think the containment field stops the energy. But the source material spends a lot of time systematically debunking this law versus love dichotomy.
How so? Where does it start?
Well, you can start with the most basic statement of faith in Judaism, the Shema, from Deuteronomy 6. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. It is a commandment to love.
Which is a paradox, right? Can you command an emotion? Can you force someone to feel love?
Maybe not a fleeting emotion, but you can absolutely command an orientation. You can command a loyalty. You can command a posture. And then look at Psalm 119. It is the longest chapter in the entire Bible. What is it about?
It's about the law. It's verse after verse of, your statutes are my delight, your law is my meditation.
It is. But read the tone. It is a passionate love poem. The writer says, oh, how I love your law. It is my meditation all the day. He isn't grudgingly obeying speed limits so he doesn't get a ticket. He is obsessed with the beauty and the goodness of the structure God has provided. He sees it as a gift.
That is such a hard headspace for us to get into. We usually view rules as the things that stop us from having fun. The psalmist views the rules as the very thing that makes true fun, true flourishing possible.
Because for the psalmist, the law is the shape of love. It's the architecture of safety. It's the walls of the fireplace that let the fire burn hot and bright without burning down the house.
The source also mentions a theologian named Anders Nygren. I haven't heard that name in a while. He had a famous theory about love that the source critiques. Can we unpack that for a minute?
Sure. In the 1930s, Nygren wrote a very, very influential book called Agape and Eros. And in it, he created a very sharp distinction. He argued that agape is God's love. It's totally unconditional, self-giving, always descending from God to us. And he argued that Eros is human love. It's acquisitive, it's needy, it's always climbing up, wanting to possess something it lacks.
So basically, agape is good, Eros is bad, or at best selfish.
That was his argument. God has agape, humans have eros, God gives, humans take. And that idea has filtered down into countless sermons and books.
It sounds familiar. I think I've heard versions of that my whole life.
It is a very common distinction. But our source argues it is biblically incomplete. It says that while the distinction might be useful for analysis, you can't split them that cleanly when you look at the character of God in the scriptures.
Why not? Are you saying God has eros? Does God want things from us? That feels wrong somehow. Like God should be totally self-sufficient.
According to the prophets, yes, God wants. The source points to the books of Hosea and Ezekiel. God is depicted not just as a benevolent king who politely helps people from a distance. He is depicted as a passionate, jealous husband who is alluring Israel. He has longing. He pursues. He is deeply invested.
Alluring. That is a very eros-charged word. That's what the woman in Proverbs 7 does.
It is. God is not above using the language of passionate desire. The argument here is that true divine love includes both the movement toward the beloved, eros, I want to be with you, I desire you, and the commitment to their good. Agape, I will sacrifice everything for you.
So it's a unified love, not one or the other.
Yes. Think about it. Self-giving without longing is just sterile moralism. I will help you because it is my duty, but I don't really like you or want to be around you. That's cold.
That's a bureaucrat, not a lover.
Right. But on the other hand, longing without self-giving is destructive hunger. It's, I want you, but I don't care what happens to you in the process. That's lust. God's love in the Bible holds both together perfectly. I desire you, and because of that, I will give myself for you.
That is beautiful. It makes God much more relational and less robotic. It implies that God actually likes us rather than just tolerating us out of a sense of duty.
And that is why the law in the eye is so important. It aligns our human eros with that divine pattern. It teaches us to want in a way that gives life, rather than wanting in a way that takes it.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit. We've looked at Proverbs in detail, but the source material lists what it calls canonical echoes. It connects Proverbs 7 to other parts of the Bible to show the big picture. We already touched on Song of Songs, but let's go deeper there. You called it the control group for this experiment.
Yes. Song of Songs is basically the control group to Proverbs 7's variable group. In Proverbs 7, you have eros without covenant, and it leads to death. In Song of Songs, you have eros within covenant, and it leads to life. It's a perfect literary parallel.
And the language overlaps in more ways than just the one word.
Significantly. We mentioned doting, loves, which appears in both, but there is also the sister language. In Song of Songs, the groom constantly calls the bride, my sister, my bride.
Which directly echoes Proverbs 7, say to wisdom, you are my sister.
Exactly. It's like the Bible is making the connection for us. In Proverbs, you call wisdom your sister so you don't sleep with the strange woman. In Song of Songs, the beloved one is the sister. The intimacy and the kinship have merged into one person. Passionate desire is good. It is celebrated because it is framed by that covenant kinship.
It's safe. The relationship is defined.
It's safe, and therefore it can be wild. That is the paradox that our culture misses. The fence allows the playground to be wilder. If you know you aren't going to fall off the cliff, you can run right up to the edge and enjoy the view.
And then there is Hosea. We mentioned God alluring Israel.
Hosea chapter 2 is the key text here. God says, "Therefore, behold, I will allure her and bring her into the wilderness and speak tenderly to her." That sounds like a seduction scene. But then he says, "And in that day, I will betroth you to me forever. I will betroth you to me in righteousness and in justice, in steadfast love and in mercy. I will betroth you to me in faithfulness."
He marries her. He makes a covenant.
He marries her. The passion, the allurement, leads to a promise, the betrothal. Passion doesn't contradict commitment. It expresses it. God is showing that he is the ultimate lover who channels his infinite desire into a covenant that saves and protects the beloved.
And the New Testament picks this up too. It's not just an Old Testament idea.
Oh, absolutely. The source points straight to Ephesians 5. Paul uses the one flesh language from Genesis to describe Christ and the church.
One flesh is about as physical and embodied as it gets.
It is. Paul is saying that the union between a husband and wife, that eros union where two become one, is actually a signpost, a living metaphor pointing to the cosmic union between Christ and all of humanity. And then, of course, there's 1 Corinthians 13.
A love chapter. Read at basically every wedding.
Love is patient, love is kind. We think of it as soft and gentle. But the source notes that the text says love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. It is fierce. Agape isn't passive niceness. It is a relentless grip on the beloved. It is a stubborn refusal to let go. That is the law side of love, the commitment that holds on when the feelings waver.
So we have this massive theological framework now. Vision comes first. Law and love are partners, not enemies. Eros needs a container to give life. Now, I want to land the plane in the real world. Section 6 of our outline is practical and pastoral applications. How does this change how we live on a Monday morning?
Well, first and most obviously, it completely reframes how we think and teach about sexual ethics.
Right. Because usually, sexual ethics is taught as boundary management. How far is too far? Can I do this? Can I touch that? Where's the line? It's a game of inches.
Exactly. It becomes a legalistic game of how close can I get to the fire without technically getting burned. The source argues that Proverbs 7 shifts the goal from boundary management to character formation.
Explain that difference. It sounds good, but what does it mean?
Instead of asking, what am I allowed to do, the question becomes, how do I cultivate a desire that is life-giving? It's a vision question, not a rules question. The new question is, how do I retrain my eye so that I see people as people to be loved, not as objects to be used?
That seems like it cuts right to the heart of the issue with something like pornography.
It does.
Yeah.
And the source applies the eros versus lust distinction directly to porn. If lust is movement toward consumption and extraction without reciprocity, then pornography is the quintessential distilled form of lust.
Because there's zero relationship, it's completely one-sided.
Zero. It is purely visual consumption. It is taking without giving. It is one way. It is the young man in Proverbs 7 staring at the scene without the law in his eye. He is feeding on an image, extracting a sensation, and the other person is not a person at all.
So the cure isn't just stop looking or installing a web filter.
Right. Stop looking is a behavioral fix. It's important, it's a necessary first step, but it's not the root. The problem is an orientation fix. The cure is change the lens. You have to retrain the eye to see that person on the screen as a human being made in the image of God, a sister, a daughter, which breaks the spell of consumption. You have to move your whole being from I want to take to I was made for communion.
That is a much deeper, harder work than just installing a piece of software.
It is. It's heart surgery. It's about installing the eye on the law in the pupil so you see correctly.
What about marriage? We talked about the reputation marriage sometimes gets for being boring or the place where passion dies. But the source takes a strong stance against a kind of Gnosticism here.
Right. Gnosticism is that ancient heresy that says the spirit is good and the body is bad. The source argues the Bible is radically not Gnostic. The body's very good, as Genesis says. Desire is good. Passion is good.
So marriage isn't a dampener on passion. It's not the off switch.
No. The source calls marriage sanctified passion. It argues that marriage is the safety structure, the covenant commitment, that allows eros to fully flourish without destroying the participants. It's the fireplace.
The fireplace analogy again, I like that one.
If you build a fire in the middle of your living room floor, it burns the house down. That's Proverbs 7. That's lust running wild. But if you build that same fire inside the brick-and-mortar fireplace, the covenant, it warms the whole house. The structure allows the heat to exist safely and do its good work.
I love that. Marriage isn't where passion goes to die. It's where it gets a safe place to live without killing you.
That is the summary of the biblical view of marriage, yes.
Finally, the source talks about liturgical formation. This brings us back to the very beginning, to installing the law in the eye. How do we actually do that? It sounds so abstract.
The source argues it's relational and practical, not just intellectual. Remember, wisdom is a sister. You don't just study a sister in a book. You spend time with her. You live life with her.
So it's about practices, habits.
Yes. The source mentions two key Christian practices, baptism and the Eucharist, or communion. Think about what those do to our view of the body and consumption.
Okay, unpack that. How does the Eucharist, taking that little piece of bread and cup of wine, change my view of sex? That seems like a big leap.
Well, think about the dynamic of consumption that drives lust. In the world of lust, I take to fill myself. I eat you. I consume you for my satisfaction. In the Eucharist, I am the one who is empty, and I receive a gift from God, the body of Christ, to be in communion with Him and with the Church. It trains us week after week out of taking mode and into receiving mode.
So every time we take communion, we are essentially practicing the opposite of pornography.
Exactly. We are practicing holy ingestion rather than selfish consumption. We are training our bodies and our eyes to recognize that true life comes from receiving a gift within a covenant, not from grabbing and taking what we want when we want it. It's a weekly recalibration of the lens.
That is profound. It connects Sunday morning worship directly to Friday night temptation in a way I'd never considered.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
A holistic vision for a whole life.
So as we wrap up, let's go back to that mirror, the final test that you mentioned at the beginning.
Yes, the mere function of Proverbs 7. As we close, the text is still asking you, the listener, what governs your sight? When you look at the world, at beauty, at potential partners, at success, at advertisements, what is the lens in your eye?
Are you moving toward communion or are you moving toward consumption?
That is the diagnostic question. That's the test.
And we have a summary formula to leave people with, a way to remember the core logic.
It's simple, really. Law in the eye leads to eros aligned, which leads to life. No law in the eye leads to eros collapsed into lust, which leads to death.
It's not about killing the desire. It's about aligning it.
Precisely.
Here is the thought I want to leave everyone with, based on all this. I think a lot of people feel like the Bible, or maybe God himself, is trying to crush their desires. Like, he wants you to be a stoic, emotionless robot who doesn't want anything too strongly. But this deep dive suggests the exact opposite. God isn't trying to sterilize your desire. He is trying to sanctify your hunger so you can actually be filled.
That's it. That is the whole point.
The tragedy of the fool in Proverbs 7 isn't that he wanted too much. It's that he settled for so much less. He settled for a consumption that consumes him. He settled for a cheap snack when he was being offered a banquet.
A banquet of loves. The real dodim.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive. Go check your vision. We'll see you next time.
See that.